So I got this KidZone bumper car from a friend, and it was cool and all, except it had one major flaw. It wasn't all that exciting because it moved about as slow as a raving snail. So I decided I wanted to upgrade this because I wanted it to be amazing as well as a little bit crazy and scary. Why not? The idea behind this whole project is much like the Power Wheels car project I just did recently, where I'm swapping out the stock battery, in this particular case, a measly 6-volt battery, with a 20-volt drill battery. Ooh. However, getting to this point had its challenges, and it wasn't even the final bumper car. I started with disconnecting the battery and hooking up the adapter, and then plugging in the 20-volt battery to the controller board. I quickly realized that the LED board got fried from the overvoltage. Pretty stupid on my part.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Along with that, it was apparent that the controller board might have also been fried. Honestly, I guess I should have expected this outcome, as it was rated for a 6-volt, and supplying 14 more volts was certainly going to jack things up. But instead of troubleshooting, I pushed on with the modification and mounted the battery adapter. The best spot was right in the middle and would not get in the way of the kid's feet. Drilled a hole in the side and routed the cables through. Sealed everything back up for their test run, which tragically ended as the controller board was clearly damaged and would not function. The kiddo was definitely not happy that I broke her bumper car. Frustrated, I opened up the underside to figure out the wiring, and also looked into repairing the board somehow. But through some level of laziness, I reconsidered both options. So in order to get it running, and not even try to fix this board, I decided to ditch it. And so I did some research and found out that there's updated 12-volt controller boards that you can buy to drop into one of these things. Plus, the bonus here was that the kit came with a remote. After plugging in the power input and the 2 motor outputs, it was time to see if the board could handle the 20 volts. And to my amazement, it did. And even provided 18.7 volts to the motors. Since everything seemed good to go, I started reinstalling the parts back on the bumper car. Yeah, I know, not entirely logical to take almost all the stuff out only to put it back in, but this was all part of the chaos of trying to do a week's worth of troubleshooting during my spare time. With the remote sync to the car, it was time to see how this thing would perform. It certainly was awesome to play around with, and being able to use the remote was definitely a fun capability. All was going well for about 15 minutes of use until there was a loud pop, indicating something on the board had exploded, ending the life of the bumper car yet again. And that was it. I was done playing around with controller boards, and it was time to get serious. Just like the stash. Anywho, it was time to commit to a rewiring job by using a simple DC circuit and cutting out any need to use unreliable electrical management boards. I wanted to measure how much voltage the battery was putting out and get a cool look, so I installed a DC voltage meter at the base. It was somewhere at this point of adding the voltage meter that I got the idea of spray painting the bumper car to get rid of the hot pink color. But first, let me go over what the plan was for the rewire. Re-looking at the levers, I found out how a double pull, double throw switch worked and was going to hook everything up based on this diagram. Since I was happy with the test of the switch, it was time to get to work. To do things right, I clipped all the unnecessary cables and made new ones, which appear like they're getting tons of thick solder, but that's how it looks when you splice 3 16-gauge wires together. I made up 2 positive-negative sets for the switches and power splitter cables for each of those sets. To get the new LED strip to work, I used a voltage regulator to dial down to 12 volts, but had a separate lead to provide 20 volts to the motors.
It's a beaut, Clark, it's a beaut.
If you recall, the LED board fried, so I had to get a whole new system, but it wound up being much brighter with some options to change the colors and patterns. For the last time, I was removing everything to get it all prepped for the paint job, taking off the LED guard and the old basic RGB light strip, all while rocking this new flip-flop style. Next was to remove this large and ugly sticker and remove the seat belts. I finally sanded down the plastic all over to create a more textured surface in the hopes that the paint would stick better. Cleaned everything off with 91% isopropyl alcohol. Removed the shiny black trim pieces, and it was time to get the painting. I only bought one can thinking it was going to be enough, but I could have easily benefited from a second one. So I made the one and only can work the best I could. As I waited for the bumper car to dry, my new DJI Osmo Action 3 showed up, and so I shot the rest of the install using it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next order of business was to install the terminals on the wires. This was so I could connect the switches together without having to solder the wires to the leads. It would give me flexibility in the future for any component swap outs. Since the 6-volt rated motors were going to experience a huge power increase and also generate a lot of heat, I found 2 small enclosure fans to provide some cooling. Using high-grade epoxy, I glued them to the underside of the shell while pointing them right at the motors. I was pretty excited to see how these would run, since these little fans only needed 5 volts to work, but they were linked with the regulator throttled at 12 volts for the LED light strip. Therefore, they were going to move a lot more air, as well as create a cool humming sound. Then it was on to applying the new LED strip. I wanted to not only have the strip go over the old spot, but also provide undercarriage lighting. I used up all 16.4 feet of the spool, so I had high hopes of this thing being super bright, and a much better upgrade than the original lighting configuration. After the strip was in place, I snapped back in the LED guards, hooked up all the power cables and voltage regulator, then reinstalled the control levers, plugged in the motors to the power split wires, and made sure that the polarity of the switches matched the motors so that the wheel spun in the right direction when inputs were made. Did some wire tightening and securing, aka cable management. And it was all complete. Now it was time to fire it up and put it to the test. So there you have it. I took a boring bumper car and succeeded in turning it into a crazy but epic ride. Hope you all learned something and enjoyed experiencing the process, even though it was a bit frustrating project for me. However, I am completely happy with the results. If you like this project and want to see more upgrades, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. And also be sure to check previous videos where I upgraded other items. Thanks for watching, guys, and remember, don't just fix it, make it better. See you next time.